Welcome to Sole Source, the podcast specifically for manufacturers and contractors who are tired of leaving money on the table and instead ready to become the only call their clients ever make when they have a new project. I'm Matthew Newberger, and each episode we're going to sit down with actual contractors and manufacturers that have figured out how to escape the bid trap and instead sell completely on value and build the business that they envisioned instead of one that drains them. So if you're ready to actually start filling your backlog with the types of clients you love and want to work with and make your team happy, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Welcome everybody to episode 2 of the Sole Source podcast, solely dedicated to helping companies escape the bid trap and win work before the bid even comes out. Today, my guest, Dustin Lee from Morrison, is going to walk us through his experience, his background, what he sees coming in the future for the packaging industry, and his personal experience on why they exist and what it is they do to help the industry. Welcome, Dustin.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Glad to be here.
I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to read your bio so I get it right. And that means I got to put on the glasses. Otherwise, I don't know if it makes me look smarter or older. I'm going to go with both. But
wiser. Wiser is the proper answer. Wiser.
That's why you're on the podcast. So Dustin Lee is the VP Sales at Morrison, a board member of the Contract Packaging Association and chair of the Business Intelligence Committee with PMMI, which basically means you kind of turn data into decisions, right? I think I got this right, but it also means you overanalyze your golf swing. Did we get that right?
That's one way. That's definitely a way to look at it. Absolutely.
We're going to get you on the course out here. I want to see you overanalyzing your golf swing. Maybe you can help me with mine. A couple of the things about you that the listeners or people watching the podcast may want to know. And from age 5 until you started at Morrison, you were convinced that you'd become a basketball coach.
Absolutely. I thought that through and through, and it's always my answer when we have like networking events or whatever of like, some people wanted to be firemen, some people wanted to be a doctor, astronauts. I was going to be a math teacher and a basketball coach.
Well,
and now I'm in packaging.
That could very much relate to leadership and management. You have to be good at the maths, and you certainly have to be somebody that can coach. So that you might have actually turned out to be exactly that. It just depends on the maturity of your sales team, which I'm sure they're very mature.
Sometimes. It depends on the day.
Sometimes.
Right?
But we don't want really mature sales teams because then they're just no fun to be around. So
that's right.
You're in packaging sales, but outside of work, you're a full-blown golf addict, which is great to hear because I'm also very into golf. Basketball junkie, and we just got through the Final Four. We're in that maze. And then you're a dad of 2. You like spending your time at a lake house or stepping on Legos. Maybe give me a 30-second commercial on Morrison.
Absolutely. So Morrison has been around for a long time. We are a family-owned and operated business. And really what's interesting about us is, and what we like to say is we like to solve people's problems. And there's a lot of companies that are out there that do that. But the thing that's different, I think, about us is we really try to listen to what our customers' true pain points are. And that's the main thing that we focus on. And that's, I think, also one of the reasons why the Sandler methodology has been closely with Morrison is because we're not just out there selling a widget. We're trying to understand what our customers' pain points are to solve a real problem and a real need, not only for our individual customers and partners, but in the industry as a whole. We work with both OEMs and end users, which I think also gives us a unique perspective because we are solving the needs of a lot of different people within the market. We're not just focused on a specific sector or specific industry. We get into a lot of different vertical markets that
What are some of those markets? What are some of the top markets you're in?
So every year, like that's probably one of the questions that I get, like, who's your top clients, right? And every year I would say that changes. There's a lot of beverage, there's a lot of food, there's a lot of pharmaceutical, there's a lot of personal care products. So your shampoos, your lotions, your conditioners, those type of products tend to be areas that we live a lot in because of the different shapes and sizes that are running, and also the level of attention that those companies focus on when it comes to shelf presence, right? Your shampoos and conditioners end up being the pretty packages that
Right.
nobody wants to mar up.
You could have somebody that's considering, changing their complete line, and they want to sort of understand beyond the fact. And I think everyone in sales says, hey, we can solve your problems. But a lot of times buyers want to know, and even OEMs that might partner with you, why do you guys exist? What's the problem you love to solve, and why do you love to solve that problem?
The area that we live the most would be when you're starting to deal with products that need to maintain some type of control, right? So there's a lot of times that a machine out there, or there's a production line out there, that they've got to perform a certain task. So maybe that's lane dividing, right? And there's different widgets and there's different mechanisms that can do a lane dividing process, but often there is some element or variable that has to play a perfect role in that. Maybe the conveyor speed has to be absolutely right on, or they can't have any moisture in the air, or they can't have any water on a conveyor that would impact the ability for it to work as effective as it should. The technology that we focus on is timing screws, and a timing screw maintains positive control of a product so that those outside variables, while still important, they don't play as much of a factor, and we can positively manipulate product in a lot of different ways that makes
Give
it.
a real. Can you give a real world example?
So, for example, you're running a beverage can, and you want to purchase a line that might run 1,000 containers a minute. But the labeler that you want to buy, there's not a labeler that can run 1,000 containers a minute. So you need to take that product, divide it into two equal lanes, go through two labeling procedures, and then bring it back into one common lane. And so we would live in that space where we do that lane dividing and combining and line control so that you can run as efficient as possible and maximize the throughput that your production line can run.
Got it. So you're actually creating solutions to a problem where they've already purchased equipment and it can only do so much. So how do they get more out of the equipment they've already purchased in working with you? Is that sort of a fair?
Yeah, so probably about 80% of the business that we do is on a project that has already been implemented, right? We're doing some type of aftermarket retrofit versus a brand new line that they're developing. A lot of the stuff we do is retroactive.
Got it. So they already have gone down the road with something, and now they're like, Dustin, you got to make this work for us because we can't buy all new equipment. So
Exactly.
in that process, what's the most exciting part for you personally? Is it the developing the team that goes out and finds these problems and comes up with creative solutions? Is it winning the new customer? Is it taking care of a customer you've had for 15 years? Where does the energy come from that really is why you do this?
I mean, the truthful answer is that once it's installed and they say, "I'm really glad that we worked with you," that's probably the real energy, to be honest. But probably the creating the aha moments, right? When we're working with clients and we're trying to understand their pain points, and then all of a sudden, as they start to work with us, we have that aha moment of, "Oh my gosh, I have to buy that machine from you," right? And so
What
that
what's the aha coming from? What is it that they don't understand that they come to realize when they're speaking with you that gives that epiphany?
I think I think that probably the thing that we really try to focus on is we're not trying to sell them a machine, right? We are trying to understand their problems. So connecting with them and really understanding their pain points, I would say, is the true relationship building, right? The
What
buzzword right now, I would say, is like, how is AI going to impact all these things? Having that real connection with somebody and truly understanding what's important to them and what keeps them up at night is what we focus on. And through that understanding and trust, they start to actually share real problems versus just saying, I need to buy this machine. Right. There's so many companies out there that they want to give you a bid package and say, sell me this machine. And you're like, well, what problem am I solving? Why do you need to buy this machine?
This is very central to the theme of the podcast. Talk to me a little bit about how does it impact? I think a lot of time buyers are thinking they're incentivized to get the cost down to the lowest common denominator and get as much for that cost as possible. And that's understandable. I mean, that's how many companies think, like, how do I create efficiency? However, sometimes those processes that you just described where they're buying from you and the buying process is, we're not going to meet with you, fill this out and we need a number. How does that impact you and the team? I think they actually do genuinely, the good ones really do care. But I don't know if they understand how that impacts your organization when it's an arm's length process. How is that actually impacting you and maybe even impacting the quality of the result of the project?
I mean, honestly, we struggle when those come through, right? Because it creates, I would say, anxiety in some of the sales team and really people within the company because we've got this shiny new potential project with a Fortune 500 company who says they're going to buy. But we've got to fill out this specification sheet that highlights the exact thing that we're going to do. Read this 500-page document that has all the specifications that the plant needs to do. And how do you react to that? How do you support that without actually having a conversation? And so we respond to that by honestly being fairly direct with those clients that we have to speak to somebody technical and we have to speak with somebody or we're just going to no bid it. So it's a common trend to have things go into a portal. But I would say 9 times out of 10, if we just get a bid package without any sort of conversation with a client or at least an understanding on the front end of what it's going to be, we we take the route of this is not a project for us if we can't actually have a connection with the customer.
What's your suspicion when you get one of those? Do you often feel that somebody else has already written the specification that is a competitor and you're just trying to follow a competitor's specification?
Absolutely. Right. It feels like, one of the common purchasing practices now is to try to always get 3 bids, right? Or something to that nature to either hold the incumbent supplier honest and make
Mhm.
sure that they're getting a fair and reasonable price, or they're just trying to get 3 bids even though they've already made a decision. And it feels like you just end up being that third bid if you just randomly get this email from somebody that you've never met before that sends it to the information at your company, and not having any sort of real connection, right? It doesn't feel at all like it's a real project that anybody should spend time on.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, have you ever had a situation where you were forced into that, where you were sort of dealing with somebody that had to gather the bids and you were able to break through and you were able to actually talk to the stakeholders of the project, the people that really cared about getting it right? Have you ever had that experience?
With the bid process, I would say no, we haven't really, to be honest. We've broken through to at least talk to the right person and gotten to the point where we would have a bid or could be at a point where we felt comfortable with it. But a lot of times it was already so far down a rabbit hole, or they had already been so pot committed to what they were going to do that
Right.
they weren't going to shift at that moment in time. So I have seen some success with going through and creating a relationship still for future projects. So from that standpoint, I would say there's been some positives, but not to the point where we won directly on that first bid.
Okay. We're going to disrupt that process in the future. We're going to get there. But maybe think about maybe some of your best clients, not the companies that you work with where you have direct access to the stakeholders, the people that ultimately are responsible for the financial results of the investments that are made. If it doesn't work, it's on them and it impacts them personally. How is that conversation different? What types of information do you get? What type of exposure do you get? What type of learning do you get when you can speak with them? And maybe even an example of how you may have come up with a completely different solution than what they were looking for.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. So I think a great scenario, again, without naming names, was they came to us asking for this is the solution that we want to have, right? And through really trying to better understand what the driving force was, there was a specific project where they were looking for automation of taking a product and putting it inside of a cardboard box,
okay.
essentially, a display box. And
Okay. They already knew what they wanted and approached you with that. What happened from there?
so from that standpoint, we learned that okay, they were really trying to create a more attractive package and they were trying to automate something that was already taking place. So they were taking those products and putting inside a cardboard box and then creating a variety pack. It wasn't just about automation, it was also about where can we have cost savings? And also, in addition to cost savings, how do we create a more attractive package that's on the shelf? And as we work down that rabbit hole, we could have just quoted an automation solution that would have done the job, but through discovery, we completely changed the outlook. And not only did we have an automation solution, but we got rid of all their cardboard costs altogether and switched the package to a sleeve package or a sleeve bundle so that on the shelf it was more attractive. It allowed them to put graphics on it. It had way less ongoing costs because there was no more corrugate there. And ultimately, we probably should have priced it to the point where we could get a fraction of all the savings that they were having on all the cardboard gone. It was really cool to really understand how the end goal in their mind was never actually shared, right? They had already shared what they thought was that solution. And our best clients are the ones that are willing to have those ongoing conversations and those challenging conversations of why, right? Keep digging deeper, those 5 whys. Okay, why do you want to do that? And what are the outcomes of that? And once that happens, how does that impact you? How does that impact your bonus, right? And being direct with us on what success looks like for them so that we can help create them that success for them.
And you're really talking about that part of what we train at PMMI, that pain funnel piece, right? But there's an important distinction you're making that I really like, which is you actually want to engage, and maybe the advice for people that are serious about working with you, they need to engage at the stage at which they've identified their goals, not so far down the line as when they've already determined the solution for the goal. They need to involve you in the goal and how to get to the solution. And that's where you end up saving them tons of money. So everybody, if you want to work with Morrison, the best thing to do is to have very clear understanding of what results do you want, then engage them at that point, not at the RFP phase where they can't really help you. I want to change topics a little bit. Have you looked at the trends that are coming that are going to impact your clients? Whether that's an OEM or whether that's an end user client, what do they need? What most people you're working with want to know is what's going to happen to their business in the future based on your perspective, right? What do you see coming between now and sort of the end of the year that people that might be buying from you or working with you should be thinking about, but maybe aren't?
I mean, I think probably the ongoing one that we are trying our best to stay on top of is an ever evolving level of innovation, right? Just because you're doing something today, it's not going to be the same tomorrow. If you're not willing to innovate, I think that that's a real risk, in my personal opinion. I think that there's enough that, especially from an AI perspective and how people are doing business, from the package changes that are happening within um, the level of trying to become more eco-friendly, right? There are things that are forcing you to change how you design equipment and how you're supporting customers. So that is a huge thing that I think everyone needs to be paying attention to and being willing to continue to evolve.
Give me an example of when you're talking to somebody right now who is maybe brushing it off and saying, Dustin, we don't need to innovate right now. We're trying to keep costs under control. We're worried about fuel prices. We're worried about our labor costs. So we're just going to hold off for now, and we're not going to innovate. Like, what is it you're hearing as the resistance to that? What do you think it's going to cost these companies? We got to protect the buyer, right? If
Yeah.
they thrive, you thrive, and I know that's why I'm just curious as to, you have a lot of these conversations, and it's not unusual to hear these pushbacks and go, boy, I wish I could just get through to this person that this is a very bad idea or a very dangerous position to take right now in the way the world's changing.
I mean, I think one of the things that we've seen from a trend perspective is there is this level of hesitancy to truly make a commitment on a high level purchase, right? Or any type of capital expenditure. It doesn't have to be high level, but as long as it's capital, there's been a
Yeah.
hesitancy. And especially when there's already discussions and agreement and alignment on what cost savings could be, right? We've dealt with a couple different clients that we've highlighted that their cost savings would be less than 6 months and they've been sitting on it for a year and a half. And it just
Interesting.
doesn't make any sense, right? And so from a buyer perspective, I think trying to either be more transparent or understanding of what their actual risks are, right? Or why they wouldn't make that commitment or that jump to making those purchases. But from the companies that are selling it, right? Like, be abundantly transparent that you are leaving money on the table and making sure that you are broadcasting that to to your clients, that they're based on all the analysis, especially if there's joint alignment, right? We're not just making a return on investment statement without getting alignment from the client. But if there's alignment and there are numbers that they're actually sharing to showcase why it makes sense to make this purchase, once you have some of these crazy savings that people could be having, it's confusing right now from the uncertainty as to why they're not moving forward. And I would say that I'm hearing that throughout the market.
The hesitancy, even when the payoff is very clear.
Correct.
Why do you think that is? We always teach in selling, go to the right decision maker, get the answers, pick up the phone and say, hey, I need to understand why you've just lost 6 months of money you could have had. So there's something I'm not understanding. But if we don't have that, what do we guess? What do you guys thinking the reason might be? Wrong decision maker? We're not talking to the right person?
Part of that has to be the case, but also when we've been as high up as the president, CFO that we're talking with and dealing with, it is definitely mind-boggling. I would ask them what their true fear is. We do a lot of business in the wine and spirits market, and wine and spirits are way down right now. And so is that the bigger concern? Because now it becomes is it a risk statement? Because you can save all this money if you move forward and you could be more cost effective for your products, or are you afraid that you're going to go out of business before, or go bankrupt? If you look at the wine and spirits market, there's so many companies that haven't made it, right, and have made some tough decisions recently to shut down plants.
Yeah. I can't remember the company, but there was one that said we're not producing anything in the 2026 year because we have so much overstock that we just don't need to even manufacture for the next year. Going back, and I mean, that's a perfect example of a trend where maybe the advice is turn everything off. I mean, it could be that that's the advice for some companies. But what caused the liquor industry to go through such a downturn? What was that?
I mean, I think a lot of it is new buyer trends, right? You look at some of the younger generation, right? There's less people that are drinking. There are more people utilizing cannabis or just being very health conscious. And so they're viewing alcohol as something that they're not interested in. It's funny. I've got a niece and nephew in high school, right? And thinking back to my high school days and the discussion around drinking, and it was something that people, in certain groups were always looking to try to do on a weekend or whatever. And that's not the case. It's not the case anymore. At least from the small survey that I have to deal with.
Right. Survey of 5. But do you see other trends like that coming? In other words, if you point Morrison in the direction where you see very positive trends versus maybe declining trends, which ones do you think are the winners and losers and then, in the foreseeable future, next year?
I mean, from a vertical market perspective, it's hard to not pay attention to anything that has some type of body image that's connected to it, right? You look at some of the GLP-1s and how much that is growing in the world.
Oh my goodness, it's blown up. Did you hear about that MedV company that they're just a front end for that? Literally built the whole thing on AI, and they're going to do 1.8 billion in revenue in 2 years, and they don't even make anything. They just literally fill out the form so you can get so yeah, that's a big trend. What else?
So, and I think anything that's like kind of somewhat tied to that, right? I think you're still going to have a lot of things in, call it the makeup industry, that people are paying attention to what they look like. And with the way that the average consumer and person deals with, highlighting what they look like with social media, and I don't see that one going away personally.
Interesting. If you think about it, I mean, we're more on camera than we've ever been, right? Every generation that comes online, if you will, is more used to interfacing with a phone or a camera than ever before. So that makes sense that anything body image related would be, on the upswing. So that's definitely an area, whether that's in pharma, that's in cosmetics, that's in supplements, it's in sort of, you name it, anything that makes you look better on camera could be something that could be pretty valuable. Talk to me then maybe a little bit about, again, the thrust of this and the podcast is really about making sure that you win before the bid ever comes out, that you achieve sole source status with clients. And you've given some good advice to the marketplace on how to interact and how to engage with you and what it is you do and the problems you solve. But maybe to, just make this a little human. I mean, anyone that's in an organization where you have to sell to keep the lights on and grow and thrive, there's always that one that got away. There's always that one you think about, right? The sort of maybe the one you lost that you still think about. Can you think of one of those and maybe what you do differently now, what you learned from that?
Absolutely. There's a couple of them, right, that come to mind. And where you invest a lot of time and money and resources into trying to go after what seems to be like a great project. The thing that I push our sales team to try and do, and the thing that I would want to highlight is be on the front end of having conversations, making sure that there truly is alignment and there's always a next step, and that at the end of the day, the customer can still say no. We saw what the solution was, but we weren't paying attention to what the customer was saying or what the customer was thinking or even asking them, right? We were saying this is the solution. This is what you should be buying. This makes sense. We can fix your problems. And we weren't letting them have a voice, right?
Mm.
So we didn't let them ultimately say no. And we highlighted so much excitement over what we were going to be doing that I think we created this level of fear for them in not wanting to disappoint us by telling us no. And so they
So,
just kept us on the hook for way longer than should have.
sense of magnitude, don't go exact numbers here, but how big was that opportunity?
7 figures for sure.
Yeah, you're going to think about that one. So, encapsulate that for me because you had some good lessons in there. What are the lessons you learned and what would you do different?
I think always making sure that communicating to customers that this is why it's important to them and making sure there's alignment on what their true needs are and highlighting and getting alignment on their pain points. I think we often, or in that scenario or that I'm talking about, is we communicated what we thought their pain points were, but we never confirmed. We never truly understood if that was what they thought or what they were feeling. We just said, this is your pain point.
That's a very important message. One of the things we talk about with business leaders is anytime we're in a sale situation, we will never take our assumptions. The rule is no mind reading. We can absolutely know their pain, but unless they articulate it, in their minds, it doesn't exist. And you telling them the pain, actually psychologically, they will resist what you tell them. And as a aspiring someday coach, and certainly a coach in sales, it's the same with your salespeople. You can't tell them how to do something. It won't work. And anyone who's listening that's been in a management role knows you can't just tell people what to do and it works. They need to understand the why and the how and all of those different things. So when it comes to sales, one of the things we have to do is we have to incorporate the rule of unless the client said that was pain, it's not pain. We could be 100% right. In 5 years, we could look back and say, we told you so. We told you that wasn't going to work. But that's not the goal of why you guys are in business. You're in business to help people. So the rule is it must, whatever the pain is, it must be in the client's words because they never argue with their own data. If they say that's pain and it must be solved, it must be solved. If we say it's pain and it must be solved, they say, I don't know if I believe you. So one thing anyone can incorporate from this call based on a lesson you learned and they can benefit from your lesson is the pain has to be in the words of the client, right? We have
Absolutely.
that SVIC VOS that we talk about in training, right? It's you got to SVIC VOS this thing. That's a great lesson learned. And I think a lot of people, especially because your business is so technical, it's very easy to be smarter than the customer and outsmart yourself in the process. So it sounds like that's what you're doing. So tell us about Morrison in the future. You know, that wasn't in kindergarten. You weren't saying, hey, someday I'm going to be the owner of Morrison and you know, packaging equipment is where I'm going to be. But you ended up here. Talk about the future. Where do you see the company headed?
We want to continue to serve the market and be what we like to say, we're a big enough company to have an impact, but we're still small enough and agile enough to be able to pivot and be able to support things as needed, right? So we're not trying to be this big giant corporation with a lot of red tape. We want to be able to have those personable relationships with our clients. And we want to be exactly what you were talking about. We want to be those sole source suppliers as much as we possibly can. We are trying to get a little bit more focused on who our ideal clients are and being upfront with those companies when it's a good project and when it's not a good project. I think there was a long time where we would just go after really anybody that would talk to us in some capacity, right? But that's gotten us into some trouble. And as anybody, right? it's easy to happen, and we are trying to be more strategic with that for sure.
So you mentioned you're working on your ideal client profiles. We sometimes throw around the acronym ICPs, and it's really not like a just fill out the form exercise. What's one ideal client that you've been discussing recently? Not names, but profile.
So we really feel like we end up working with a lot of clients that end up running at least 3 different package sizes on the same production line. So if somebody is going to be running multiple sizes, we feel like we have a lot of solutions, and we're a great partner for those companies to improve changeovers and to be able to be versatile on their production lines and allow them to feel comfortable adding a new size, right? So then we're able to work with the marketing groups and the engineering groups and the sales groups so that they can expand their clientele and ultimately help them make more money. So that's a really great customer for us, is someone that's looking for that diversification and expanding the different number of packages that they run on a production line.
Perfect example. I think you've also made a good case for why businesses should engage you earlier in the process. So now, as we come to the conclusion of the show, how do people get in touch with you?
So we really try to push a lot of different content throughout the market. So we have a lot of different videos that showcase past solutions on our website. It is www.morrison, which stands for Container Handling Solutions.com. So morrison-chs.com.
And would you be bold enough if somebody's thinking about sending you an RFP, but they're like, wow, maybe if I could talk to Dustin, could you share your email address with those people? I mean, you might be too highfalutin. You might be the big owner now, and you don't take calls anymore. Your assistant takes all your calls. You mind sharing your email for everybody?
Absolutely. It's my first name dot last name at morrison-chs.com. So Dustin.lee at morrison-chs.com.
Okay.
And also feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
And if you just, I want to congratulate you. You've been a leader in the industry because you've helped develop the program that we use for manufacturers in the industry. You've been heavily involved with PMMI. You've been obviously heavily involved in leadership with your company. There are people that I refer to in industries as being lightning rods because they're so connected. And you're one of those people you should be connected with. I think you're going places. So thank you for sharing everything today. And we appreciate you having you on the show. And for all those people that have been listening, you've been listening to The Soul Source. This is where leaders come to escape the bid trap and ultimately get selected before the bid. Thanks for listening. Dustin, thanks for being our guest.
Thanks for having me, Matt. See ya.